Diplomat's Archives, Hidden Stories. This is the 42nd story. About 8,000 kilometers northwest of the Korean Peninsula lies the country of Poland. The official relationship between South Korea and Poland began in 1989. The establishment of diplomatic ties, which broke through the barriers of ideology, ushered in a brand new era. Since then, the two countries have maintained a close relationship. In 2013, they elevated their ties to a strategic partnership, and following a major defense export agreement with Korea in 2022, they have solidified their positions as key partners in both security and the economy. People-to-people exchange is also thriving. Today, about 1,000 Poles live in Korea, while approximately 4,000 Koreans reside in Poland, continuing this vibrant connection. But did you know that long before official diplomatic ties were established, there were people who had already connected these two nations? In a time when everything about each other was unfamiliar, there were those who met as if by fate. Today, we bring you their story. Our first story begins with this individual. His name is Wacław Sieroszewski. And these are the books he wrote. What kind of books are they? They are all about Korea. But who exactly was he, and what led him to write about Korea? To find out more, our team first headed to the Polish embassy in Seoul.
My name is Ba르토시비시니에프sky. I'm the ambassador of the Republic of Poland to Republic of Korea.
While his name is relatively unknown to many Koreans, Wacław Sieroszewski is actually a very famous figure in Poland.
Sieroszewski was really a very interesting figure. I think the expression in English is larger-than-life character. He was born in what used to be Poland and were Polish lands in 1858. He died in 1945. He was at first an exile from Polish lands to Siberia.
As the ambassador just mentioned, in 1879, Sieroszewski was exiled to Siberia. But what was the reason behind it?
Such histories are quite commonplace in this particular period of Polish history. So the people who didn't fit in, who were for some reason at odds with the occupying powers, in this particular case the Russian Empire, were forced to flee or were sentenced to many years in exile.
In fact, when Sieroszewski was born in 1858, Poland was not an independent country.
As you know, it wasn't until 1918 that an independent Poland was reborn. At that time, in late 19th century, Poland was partitioned, which means that there was no sovereign Polish state. The partitioning powers, meaning the Russian Empire, the German Empire, and Austro-Hungarian Empire, have divided Poland into three in late 18th century.
As the ambassador explained, starting in the late 18th century, Poland was partitioned 3 times by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. As a result, the country remained under foreign rule for approximately 123 years. As a young man from a nation that had lost its sovereignty, Sieroszewski began to devote himself to the Polish independence movement. To learn more about Sieroszewski, our team decided to hold a video call with an expert in Poland.
My name is Renata Czekalska. I'm presently heading the Department of Korea at the Jagiellonian University in Kraków.
Professor Renata Czekalska is a scholar who specializes in cultural exchanges between Poland and Asia. She has also published 2 research papers on Sieroszewski.
Wacław Sieroszewski was a Polish writer, ethnographer, and also socialist activist. He was also an advocate for Polish independence. Definitely, he played a very meaningful role in the political, cultural, and intellectual movement, which led Poland to regaining independence in 1918. He was arrested several times by Russian authorities. Finally, he was exiled to Siberia. He spent 12 years there, and altogether 16 outside the home country.
An exile with no end in sight. But instead of giving in to despair, he began to immerse himself in a new task. He threw himself into ethnographic research, documenting the lives of the people there.
He began to study cultures that he encountered. First of all, it was the Yakut community, the Yakut people. He actually married a Yakut lady when he was there, and he became therefore the pioneering ethnographic researcher. Polish ethnographer who first researched Yakut people.
As a result of his efforts, he published a book titled 12 Years in the Country of the Yakuts. This work gained significant attention in Poland, establishing his reputation as a writer.
So Sieroszewski, for me, he's quite an inspirational figure because rather than getting depressed and getting resigned about his fate, he actually used this his stay in a very distant part of the world from judging from the realities of the late 19th century. He used it to the fullest to bring closer the culture, the history, the routines, the habits of local population.
At this point, one can't help but wonder, what drove Sieroszewski to dedicate 2 entire books to Korea? Driven by curiosity about what first sparked his interest in Korea, our team set out to find another expert.
한국외국어대학교 폴란드학과에서 교수로 재직하면서 학생들 가르치고 있고요. 폴란드문학 번역하고 있는 최성은이라고 합니다.
Professor Choi Song-eun is an expert on Poland, recognized twice by the Polish government for her contributions in introducing Poland to Korea. She too has published research on Sieroszewski's work.
시에로셰프스키는 시베리아에서의 오랜 유배 생활을 마치고 폴란드로 돌아왔는데 또다시 반러시아 저항 운동에 가담을 하게 돼요. 그래서 다시 한번 또 시베리아로 유배를 갈 위기에 처하게 되는데 그의 지인이면서 시에로셰프스키의 어떤 필력과 연구력을 높이 사고 있던 러시아 관료가 제안을 합니다. 유배를 가지 말고 대신에 너가 전에 야쿠트족에 대한 보고서를 썼듯이 이번에는 아이누족에 대한 학술 보고서를 써서 제출을 해라. 그래서 여기에 이제 시에로셰프스키가 동의를 하고요. 그래서 2년 동안 이제 탐사 여행을 떠나게 되는데 러시아 황실 지리학회가 주관했던 동아시아 탐방에 합류하게 됩니다. 그래서 시에로셰프스키는 시베리아 횡단 열차를 타고 이르쿠츠크까지 가서 거기서 사할린과 만주 그리고 일본을 이제 탐방을 하고 1903년 가을에 배를 타고 일본에서 부산으로 들어오게 돼요.
And so, in 1903, Sieroszewski arrived on Korean soil. So, what did Korea look like when he first laid eyes on it?
On the morning of October 10, 1903, at 6 o'clock, we dropped anchor in the wide, rounded bay of Busan. Upon entering, one had to be cautious of 3 vertical rocks rising from the waves and the presence of Japanese warships. The bay is surrounded by unremarkable gray cliffs. The only greenery consists of dark pine forests scattered along the hills, the coastline, and the far end of the harbor, casting a beautiful reflection over the blue waters.
There are no grand descriptions, but his simple and honest records stand out for capturing the landscape of Korea exactly as it appeared to his eyes. After taking his first steps on Korean soil at the port of Busan, he immediately headed for Wonsan. And for the next 2 months, he traveled across the country from Wonsan to Seoul, beginning his exploration of this foreign land. Upon returning to Poland after his journey, in 1905, he published Korea, the Key to the Far East. The first ever Polish travelogue and scholarly study on Korea.
한국극동의 열쇠는 폴란드 한국학의 시초가 되는 상징적인 저작물입니다. 한국의 정치, 경제, 사회, 문화, 기후, 자연환경, 여성 문제에 이르기까지 정말 광범위한 주제를 아우르고 있어서 1950년대까지는 폴란드에서 정말 한국 관련한 유일무이한 전문 서적으로 그렇게 공인받아 왔었고요.
But what exactly about Korea captured his heart and inspired him to document it so extensively?
As a person very much involved in social issues in Poland, I think he was fascinated by the way Korean community worked, because he traveled by horse from Wonsan to Seoul, and he traveled through villages. He stayed in those villages, he slept in people's houses, so he could observe, for example, how small village communities supported themselves, how strong were the ties, how people organized self-help. And I think this was one thing which definitely fascinated him.
As I took off my tall boots, a curious crowd of all ages gathered around, watching my every move with hushed whispers and tense anticipation. When they saw that my legs were perfectly ordinary, a flicker of disappointment crossed their faces. It was clear from their eyes that they had expected something extraordinary from a visitor they called the Western Ghost.
Sieroszewski explored the nature of Korea and visited various places, from small rural villages to bustling cities. He met with people from all walks of life and closely observed their way of living.
시에로셰프스키는 굉장히 관찰력이 뛰어난 그런 연구자이기도 했어요. 그래서 자신이 직접 이제 봤던 이를테면 부산이나 원산, 제물포 이런 곳의 항만 시설이라든지 서울 도심의 풍경도 뭐 종각이나 탑골공원이나 종로, 그리고 이 지역에 사는 사람들의 생활상, 또 시골로 가서는 농촌의 마을 구조라든지 농업사 연구에 참조할 수 있는 농사 기술, 이런 것까지 아주 상세하게 기록을 하고 있어서 학술적 가치도 굉장히 높은 작품이라고 할 수 있겠고요.
Reading his book, we are able to envision the Korea of 1903, a time and place none of us have ever personally experienced. Professor Choi Sung-eun, an expert on Poland, draws our attention to another part of his book.
이 책의 가치는 약소국에 대한 어떤 연대 의식을 들 수 있을 것 같아요. 시에로셰프스키는 러시아 국적을 갖고 있었지만 그 피지배 국가인 폴란드의 지식인이었단 말이죠. 그래서 그의 작품 전반에는 일단 유럽 제국주의가 확장되는 것, 뭐 문명이나 근대화의 이름으로 무분별하게 타국으로 뻗어나가는 것에 대해서 비판적인 시각을 갖고 있었고요. 그리고 한국을 바라볼 때는 뭔가 극동의 열쇠, 굉장히 중요한 입지를 갖고 있는 나라이고, 하지만 국제정치의 희생양인 나라, 이런 시각으로 바라보고 있었어요.
Just as the professor pointed out, Sieroszewski recognized the strategic weight of the Korean Peninsula. He traveled through Korea in 1903. At that time, Korea was not yet under direct Japanese rule. However, with the growing political and economic influence of Japan and other world powers, the winds of change were already blowing. Traveling through Korea at such a time, Sieroszewski must have sensed that a major transformation was soon to come. During this same period, Sieroszewski's homeland, Poland, was also under foreign occupation. As mentioned earlier, his visit to Korea was deeply connected to his history as a Polish independence activist. Given these circumstances, it is reasonable to assume that he felt a certain sense of solidarity with Korea and its people. Another expert we met through a video interview also agreed with Professor Choi's perspective.
My name is Marlena Oleksiuk, and I've been teaching at the University of Wrocław in Korean Studies team.
Dr. Marlena Oleksiuk, who currently teaches Korean language and literature at the University of Wrocław, earned her doctorate for her research on Sieroszewski.
He discovered that Korea situation is very similar to our situation in Poland. Actually, at the time, Poland didn't exist on the map. And he noticed that Japanese soldiers, Japanese people started coming to Korea. And we have to tell that he was in Korea just before the Japanese colonialism. So he was the witness, actually, of this Japanese colonialism, how it started in Korea.
However, reading through his book, there are also parts that could be viewed critically from a Korean perspective.
물론 한국과 일본의 관계에 있어서는 좀 일본의 지나치게 우호적인 시각을 갖고 있어서 좀 비판의 여지도 남길 수 있습니다. 이것은 이제 시에로셰프스키는 동아시아에서 가장 먼저 개항을 단행한 일본이 조선의 근대화에 기여할 수 있을 거라고 보고 있었고 이런 관점이 책 속에도 나타나고 있긴 합니다.
In fact, it is difficult to understand why he showed such a favorable attitude toward Japan, especially given that he had witnessed the suffering of his own homeland and criticized European imperialist expansion.
모순이죠. 일종의 모순인데 일단 일본을 먼저 다녀갔었고요. 시에로셰프스키가 어쨌든 이 동아시아에서 일본, 중국, 한국 중에 제일 먼저 좀 더 오래 이렇게 관찰했던 나라가 일본이었고 그래서 이제 서양인들이 좀 이렇게 여행하기에 조선보다는 당시 편안한 환경이었죠. 왜냐면 개항을 가장 먼저 단행했으니까. 그리고 이제 어쨌든 러시아 국적을 갖고 있었고 이게 러시아어로도 출간이 되어야 되는 책이니까 일종의 검열 같은 게 있었겠죠. 그래서 어떤 조선의 독립이나 이런 것들을 좀 강하게 주장하는 이런 것들을 좀 담아내기 힘든 면도 있었을 거라고 보는데요. 그래도 이 책의 이제 말미에 가게 되면 그 신문균이라는 인물을 통해서 굉장히 많은 깨달음을 얻게 되거든요.
Foreigners seem interested only in profiting at our expense. They seize the finest horses and the best forests on the flimsiest of pretexts. Yet, they never fulfill their own obligations. Then what about the Japanese? Are they not the only ones attempting useful reforms in Korea? Improving the administrative system, educating the people, abolishing slavery, and organizing the national economy? That is true. However, they only seek to satisfy us on the surface. They aim to change our appearance while hollowing out our inner selves, leaving nothing but a shell. They intend to obliterate our soul. He leaned on his elbows on the table and drank in a somber silence. I did not dare to say that the soul of a people can only be guarded by the people themselves.
신문균이라는 인물이 있는데 그는 시에로셰프스키의 안내자이면서 통역자였어요. 신문균의 입을 빌려서 한국의 어떤 현실에 대한 고발, 또 이런 불안함 이런 것들을 다 이제 인터뷰 형식으로 또 다 담아내고 있습니다. 그리고 이제 마지막에 두 사내가 헤어질 때 이별을 아쉬워하면서 악수를 하면서 서로 손을 꽉 맞잡으면서 이렇게 슬퍼하는 장면, 이런 거를 읽어볼 때 뭔가 한국 사람에 대한 애정, 따뜻한 시선 이런 것들을 느낄 수 있습니다.
Sieroszewski, whose interest in Korea ran deep, published another book about the country just 1 year after releasing Korea, The Key to the Far East. Interestingly, this next book was a work of fiction titled Wol-seon-i, The Gisaeng. To provide some context, the Gisaeng were professional female artists of the time. Highly skilled in music, dance, and poetry, they often led lives defined by both cultural brilliance and social hardship. After returning to Poland, Sieroszewski was imprisoned in a political labor camp. It was there, amidst the harsh conditions of his captivity, that he wrote Wol-seon-i, The Gisaeng.
1906년에 출간된 기생월선이는 폴란드에서 한국을 배경으로 한 최초의 장편 소설로 언급되고 있고 이 작품 같은 경우는 이제 역사적 사실을 기반으로 하지만 여기에 멜로드라마적인 요소까지 가미시켜서 독자들로부터 또 많은 관심과 호응을 얻었고 20세기에도 꾸준히 이제 시에로셰프스키의 전집에 계속 이렇게 수록이 되면서 독자층을 계속 유지를 해왔습니다.
The first ever Korean-themed novel to be published in Poland. What kind of story does it tell? Kim Ki, a young scholar, travels to Seoul to sit for the Kwago, the Royal Civil Service exam. and stays at the home of a distant relative, Kim Ok-gyun. In this story, Kim Ok-gyun is portrayed as a powerful high-ranking official representing the conservative faction. After losing his entire fortune to his uncle, Kim Gi falls into despair. On someone's advice, he seeks out Kim Non-chi, the son of Kim Ok-gyun, and visits a Gisaeng house that Non-chi is known to frequent. There, Kim Gi meets a Gisaeng named Wol-seon and falls in love at first sight. However, she is already in a deep relationship with Kim Non-chi. Nevertheless, Kim Gi becomes close with both Wol-seon and Kim Non-chi. Kim Non-chi, depicted as a leading figure of the reform faction, gathers comrades to plan a revolution. In doing so, he directly confronts his father, who remains a staunch advocate of the closed-door policy. Amidst the tension, Kim Ok-gyun forcibly takes Wol-seon and presents her to the king in an attempt to secure royal favor. Kim Gi and Kim Non-chi break into the palace to rescue Wol-seon and launch their revolution. However, the revolution is crushed by the forces of Kim Ok-gyun, Japan, and China. In the end, Wol-seon, Kim Gi, and Kim Non-chi all meet a tragic death. The novel Wol-seon-i, the Gisaeng, published by Siero-Shephsky in 1906, is set against the backdrop of a real-life event that took place in Korea in 1884. That event is the Kapsin coup. What's particularly intriguing is that Kim Ok-gyun, the real-life leader of the Kapsin coup, is used as the name of a conservative figure in the novel. But what led Siero-Shephsky to write a novel like Wol-seon-i, the Gisaeng in the first place?
갑신 정변이 셰로셰프스키한테는 이렇게 다가왔을 것 같아요. 이게 이제 일본의 지지를 등에 업은 개화파의 급진적인 어떤 쿠데타가 청나라와 보수파에 의해서 사흘 만에 진압당하는 사건이잖아요. 그러니까 열강에 짓눌린 어떤 민족의 각성, 약소 민족의 급진적인 개혁 시도, 이런 것으로 다가왔을 것이고, 그래서 소설의 소재로 매력적이었을 것이고요. 근데 여기에 이제 또 하나의 축이 있죠. 중국과 일본이라는 동양의 두 열강이 이제 조선을 서로 차지하기 위해서 갈등과 충돌을 벌이는 그 어떤 결과물, 그러니까 이런 두 가지 측면이 있었기 때문에 소설의 소재로서 매력적으로 다가왔을 것이라고 생각이 들고,
Through the dialogues between his characters, Siero-Shephsky's Wol-seon-i, the Gisaeng, vividly illustrates the clashing ideologies of the reformists and the conservatives in late 19th century Korea. Professor Tchekalsky offers a different perspective in her analysis of the background behind Siero-Shephsky's writing of Wol-seon-i, the Gisaeng.
At that time, when Poland did not exist as an independent state, writing openly about political struggle against the occupying powers, in the first place, it wouldn't be allowed by censorship. So a story set in a distant place like Korea, not very well known in Poland at that time, a little bit exotic, a little bit fable-like, offered him, I think, a kind of a way around, which worked quite powerfully, actually. In many ways. In the first place, he managed to build a metaphor which was very understandable to the Polish people and which conveyed what he wanted to say to them, trying to support hope also, trying to show how much personal strength mattered in situations like that.
Korea, The Key to the Far East, written in 1903, and Wol-seon-i, The Gisaeng, written in 1906. These two books played a vital role in introducing Korea not only to Poland, but to all of its neighboring countries.
I know that this book, the Korea, The Key to the Far East, appears also in Russian language. And I found also a lot of materials in English about the book. I know that many scholars all over the world are interested in his works and in this book, especially in this book. And I found that many scholars in United States, the Netherlands, Russia, and Japan are interested and read his book. This Korea, The Key to the Far East. So I think this book contributed to introducing Korea to the Polish public and European society. And when he published the book in 1905, also Polish newspapers published some short information about his journey and about his book.
In the beginning of the 20th century, when the book came out, I think Korea was rather overshadowed in this part of the world by China and Japan. And Sieroszewski's works were among the first in Polish to present Korea as a distinct civilization with its own history, with its own culture, and with its own social structures, and of course with its own problems, but that comes without saying. I think they also allowed some sense of sympathy among the Polish nation for the struggle of the Koreans, because the Poles could identify themselves with the Koreans as a nation threatened by powerful neighbors, like we were always in our history.
Sieroszewski traveled through Korea for just 2 short months, yet he left behind 2 remarkable books about the country. Even after returning to Poland, and even after his homeland gained independence in 1918, he didn't forget the nation of Korea.
일찍이 단재 신채호 선생님께서 그런 말씀을 하십니다. 한국은 동방의 폴란드다. 하고 많은 지상의 수많은 나라들 중에 폴란드를 지목해서 한국의 현실과 병치시키셨거든요. 근데 시에로셰프스키도 같은 마음이었을 것 같아요. 한국을 바라볼 때 뭔가 폴란드와 닮은 꼴인 나라, 역사적으로 유사성이 많은 나라, 정서적으로 유대감이 느껴지는 나라라고 생각했을 것이고요. 그래서 이런 그의 생각은 1927년에 작가가 폴란드 라디오와 인터뷰를 하는데 그 인터뷰에서 잘 나타납니다.
Later on, after Poland was reborn in 1918, he became a politician. He served in the Polish parliament, And he died, as I mentioned, in 1945, having lived what I believe was a really fascinating life. And Korea became part of it too.
In 1903, at a time when many in both nations were unaware of each other's existence, there was a man named Sieroszewski who connected Korea and Poland. Through the records he left behind, we could glimpse the Korea of the past, seen through the eyes of a Pole. And what's more, our team has uncovered another surprising fact. About a decade after Sieroszewski's visit to Korea, there was a Korean family who actually moved to Poland. Another hidden story between Korea and Poland continues in the next episode.